right, welcome to another episode of Can I Say Something? I am Andrew Ward. I am very excited to have my guest here today. We're going to be talking about the latest in cannabis reform and legalization in Mexico. I have the president of Cannativa, Polita Pepper, here to talk about what's going on in the country. I could describe it, but to be honest with you, I'm not really all that smart. I'm not that articulate, so I'm going to turn it over to the person who's doing all the work. Polita, tell the guests who are you and the work that you're doing.
Hey, I'm super happy to be with you today, guys. First of all, I want to apologize for my Spanglish, which is that we call here. I'm going to try to do my best effort here to communicate. So I'm Polita Pepper. This is the name that I started using since I go into the cannabis forums because I was afraid of the risk of using my real name. And after a while, it became my real name actually. So I co-founded Cannativa back in 2014 when I was deported from California, and I was deported not because I was making my life of marijuana, but because I'm Mexican. So as 25 million more of Mexicans, I crossed the border looking for the American dream. In my case, the American green dream. And I went there and I realized that there's another way to approach to the cannabis plant different than the one I knew in my country, right? There's another complete history that California, which is the place I went, which California was related with the plant, full of that all that hippie culture, love and grow organic. And I realized there's another way to be part of the cannabis culture. So when I went back in 2014, deported to Mexico, I decided with my partner, which Nico Malasartes, which I co-found Cannativa, that we cannot doing the same thing because we have not the same privilege because legalization, it is actually a privilege. So we don't have that privilege here in Mexico. So we decide to teach people how to fish instead selling the fish. So we found Cannativa, and ever since that, we are a non-profit association, and we are focused in empower people through education, because we strongly believe that education is the key to social transformation. Education changed people's minds, and people change their own realities. So ever since 2014, we've been teaching everything since how to grow, how to do your own medicine, how to get your legal permit to grow, on all kind of things with cannabis related subjects. So here we are now with you.
Amazing. There are so many great points in there, and I'm excited to dive into your work with Cannativa and the ongoing regulations in Mexico, and especially just diving into your own personal story as well. Before we start off, though, don't worry about any issues with the English. As I've told you when we met in Barcelona, mi español esta mierda, necesito estudiar mucho. So yeah, you're going to be fine here, and no worries whatsoever. We really appreciate you diving in here, though, because we feel like Mexico, we hear a little bit about what's going on there, but there's not a ton in U.S. media about where the cannabis laws are. So really excited to dive in. But before we do, I'd love to talk about your experience in America. How long were you in California for, and what did you learn from that cannabis experience? Like you said, I know you were touching on it a little bit with Cannativa already, but what was that experience like for you, and how did that shape your green dream?
Oh my God! It was like just life changing. I'm a PhD social anthropologist. So when I went to live to California, I already have a master's degree, and I was focusing my research ever since then until now. I research indigenous population through Latin America who are growing cannabis. So it's a super interesting research, which is like, I think it's gonna be more important these days that we are like discussing about legalization. But well, I was involved with the research of the people who it's in the fields. In my country, as many other producer countries, that people is mostly indigenous people, or people that they don't recognize themselves as indigenous, but they live in pretty much the same condition, and that condition, it's poverty. So it's poor people who is growing in the South Global cannabis, and South Global is these countries as Mexico. That is not like a geographic South. It's the social and economical conditions that make that kind of countries be part of the all the production chain, but just be part in the production, and they don't have either access or rights or even ability to choose what they can or cannot do with the goods they are producing. Well, so when I crossed the border to go through my American Green Dream, it was first of all, most of academic purpose, and I never had been in California, so it was my first time, and I was super in love. First time I go there and see all the redwoods and all the magic about that. I know that California is pretty different from other from the United States, as can be New York or maybe Colorado, right? So I have also the privilege to go into that cities which cannabis culture is being growing, right? The Emerald Triangle. So I visit several different kind of growth operation, and I start working for some of them as millions and millions Mexicans as me. But I was even with the privilege of work in the cannabis fields, which is not the same as the berry fields or the tomatoes or the beans. It's pretty much another world. So I stay in California for I think 5 years in a row, and I super overstayed, and I was working and not paying taxes and being a Mexican, so was reasons enough, to be deported. But what I was most important for me was California was kind of my other not academic PhD about cannabis culture. It's not just about because the history that place has, but this is also to the way that people recognize the plant as a medicine, and embrace that cause and take the medicine as they world, and they spread the word this from other side, totally different from my country, which is full of violence and just that kind of news in the papers, which is so talking about dead key people and cartels, that it is true in my country. But I had the privilege and the chance in this life to see other way to be related with the plant, and I think it was super interesting. And one of the most important things that I learned up in California was the do-it-yourself culture. Something that cannabis people in America are really good is in making ideas to grow your best by your own. You do your own soil, your own nutrients, your own everything, and that's
we find a way.
Yeah, totally, because it's cheaper, because you are more autonomous, because you don't depend on the global change, for example. When I go back to Mexico, when I was deported, so our idea was to build a platform, educational platform for people who empower, the main reason it's empowering people who realize that they can do it by themselves, because it is a plant, it is a medicine, you have the human right to do it. That was the base, I think, I learned in California.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for walking through that. And
Yeah.
one of the things you touched about too is, there are the different histories and the cultural usages and the connections to cannabis between California, the United States, and Mexico, and across the world for that matter. With your work with indigenous people and the histories and the usage of the plant, can you kind of walk us through, I know it's very broad, but can you kind of walk us through the history of, cannabis usage among the indigenous people in the area of what is now known as Mexico?
Yeah, well, it's different with other entheogens as peyote or psilocybin mushroom, which are legally recognized by the Mexican state as, we call it here, usos y costumbres, which is the way that Mexican state recognize the use and as a custom of that plant or that substance, for example, the magic mushrooms or the mescalina in the peyote, right? That are completely recognized by this Mexican state. What happened with the cannabis, the use as, we can talk about different, maybe, three different kind of uses by the indigenous communities. One is the kind of communities that recognize the plant as a medicine, and they are incorporating that plant into their rituals. That people is pretty much around Nayarit. They call it, cannabis is called Santa Rosa, which is an cultural appropriation right after Catholicism, and they changed all the names. You already know that history. So
Right.
Cannabis is Santa Rosa, and they use it, and it's use it mostly in the ritual way by women. They are the ones who can carry the plant, and they do dances, and they express the importance of the medicine and some of their art. This is in some region in Mexico, which is north west. Right, for some kind of ethnic groups that live there. There is one kind of use, the ritual use, and that ritual use, I must say again, is not recognized but Mexican state, because Mexican state doesn't recognize anyway.
Right.
Cannabis plant,
Yeah.
as part of the indigenous culture. The second use we can talk about is the use that it became a demand of the indigenous people. I mean, there's cannabis. It's been introduced in Mexico. We have information that maybe in the 40s, in the 50s, but ever since that, people in the fields, field workers, Mexican field workers, are growing cannabis. So by now, there's almost a century past, and there's some of the communities that are saying to the Mexican state, come on, my dad used to grow cannabis, and my granddad used to grow cannabis. So there is ancestral for me. So it's part of my culture. I cannot grow anymore corn because it's so cheap that I cannot make my living about that. So
Right.
cannabis is the main plan, which is because it's my the way that I make my money, is the way that I can participate in different kinds of areas of the society. So the second use we can talk about is the way that communities are demanding being part of the discussion, at least, are being recognized as producers, agriculture, as this cannabis agricultures, the same way as they used to be corn agricultures. So
Right.
this is the political, the political way that I asking for recognition. And one of the strongest arguments they have is it's been around my family for 2, 3, 4 generations, so it is ancestral to us.
Right. Yeah. It's the family cash plan at that point.
Yeah. And the third use we can talk about between like ethnic communities is more focusing on more recently discussion, which is medicine, right? So they say, as indigenous, we have the the right, because we also have the knowledge of how to use this kind of medicine. We've been working for centuries with mushroom. We've been working with centuries with mescalina, with the peyote, and we are the people of the earth who know how to deal with this nature substance, entheogic substance of whatever they call it. So this is a more like 15 years to here speak, and it's more like if it's cannabis plant medicine from the earth, so we have the right to use it because we are the people who are preserving all that kind of knowledge in the earth.
So it's preserving the culture while having the rightful usage.
Yeah, so there is pretty much the three uses I've been detecting in my research, and there's another, but this is the not use. It's and I think it's a pretty stronger argument also, which is marijuana is the way we made our daily lives. So we must be recognized as illegal producers because the Mexican state is not giving us another chance to do something different. So do something with your problem or let us work. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you giving me the walkthrough on that. And, one of the things that, I don't know if some of the cannabis folks have been watching on the international stage is, Mexico is kind of in a unique situation where, they haven't legalized the market, but the Supreme Court has weighed in on it. And I believe the only other country to do so this way is South Africa, if that's correct. Can you kind of talk about, how the Supreme Court weighed in on the cannabis reform in recent years and what the current situation is? Because it still seems like the lawmakers haven't acted on the Supreme Court mandates. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy for us. It's really hard to keep on day of what's happening because it's really crazy. All the last years has been so crazy. So I will try to make a timeline or what is happening ever 2015 that we have to. In 2015 we start to discuss about cannabis, and that was the same case of the states with a little girl. Our little girl is called Grace, and their families trying to, having a really hard time trying to use CBD. So this discussion appears in the social media, and then our representatives start to be worried about because we are doing a lot of noise. And then in 2015, we start the legalization. So 2015. So a year later, 2016, COFEPRIS, which is the Federal Commission of the Protection Against Sanitary Risk, permit some people to import CBD. That's 2016. The debate at that moment, it's more, the government organized the debates, and we are all talking about cannabis regulation, and we are all empowered and going to the street, going to everywhere to talking about cannabis regulation. By June, the 2017, finally, we got the medical cannabis law, which is actually the only law we have until now. So that was back in 2017. But what happened with that law? That law just allowed us to freely import CBD, which is legally produced in countries which is legal. So we are super free to import. Just
cool.
Import. Yeah, we are. Well,
we can have a lot of CBD coming in from other countries.
Well, yeah, and that law from 2017 pretty much sucks, because when you have a law that is not universal and it's just being useful for people who have money to do all that process to import CBD in dollars, which is way more expensive than their own Mexican pesos, you know. So if you don't have a law, you have a privilege.
Right. Not everybody can get that access.
Yeah, so it's not universal, it's not a law. Well, we stay with this not really cool law that which allowed us to import CBD. But one problem of that law is not just that it's not inclusive and don't let us grow. Other really important thing of that law is that they don't they don't public a regulation. So you have the law, and then you have a bunch of regulation that actually make the law work. So we have a law, but we don't have any regulation, right? So we are super cool. So we stay until meanwhile, no, we have law, we have right to import, we have no regulation of how to do everything, and then that's the cannabis law. But parallel with the cannabis law, we keep the debate of medical. We are in 2018. We have a medical cannabis law, which pretty much doesn't allow us to grow or to produce or whatever. It just allowed us to import. Well, but we keep fighting, and we are discussing not just the cannabis law is not for everybody, but we need some other kind of regulation that is not just for the people who have a medical need. What about the people who want the adult use or want the recreational, as some countries call it? And what about what we're gonna do with this kind of details, as we are the third marijuana producer country in the world? So the discussion is not about who can or who cannot. We export, we produce hundreds and hundreds and hundreds from pounds and kilos or whatever, because Mexico is a marijuana producer. So what we're gonna do with that little detail? We can import CBD, cool, but we are producing marijuana everywhere. So what about, to just put a legal frame in that situation, right? So parallel to the cannabis law, there have been so many discussions, and there's this group of people, really smart lawyers, who develop, they develop a strategy which is different from the other countries, which is the right to our own personality. So, el derecho sobre la libre personalidad, which is a human right pretty much, and it's a right recognized in the Mexican Constitution. So they argue why, if we have the right of the free personality, so I'm free enough to decide what kind of things are good for me, even if I know they are not making good for me. We can use the same argument with cocaine, but we use it with cannabis, right? So ever since 2015, parallel to the cannabis, medicinal cannabis law, there were this legal strategy, and they were making, open a little, making themselves into the branches of the wood of the Mexican laws, and they get the first 5 sentences, positive sentences of the Supreme Court in Mexico, to allow these first 5 people to use cannabis, because it's their right to their own free personality. Well, we are in that point, right? So, but the more or less 2018, we finally have the regulation of cannabis law we've been looking for, but it was again, not enough, because it was so hard to, and from the night to the next morning that we have the law, we have 5 business who have the license, and we don't know. Yeah,
and where did that come from?
Yeah, where are the requirements? Where do these guys read it? And in which page? Because nobody else knew anything about it,
Right.
So that's like, Mexican magic. Well,
yeah, because what I was researching is, so far, and correct me if I'm wrong, what I've understood is adults over the age of 18 are allowed to have up to 28 grams of cannabis and can grow up to 6 plants for personal use. And then other than that, there really aren't many other laws. Is that the current situation? Is that correct?
Well, it's been super confused because, well, it passed from 2017 until we have the regulation from the cannabis law. It was like I'm not really sure, it was 2 years or even 3 years that we were waiting that. Meanwhile, there was a full, completely market of CBD of all kind of procedents you can imagine. In legal market, it's like, doing pyramids, CBD. Everybody is like doing THC, selling it as CBD, and it's a huge boom of CBD. None of them, I believe, it's legal because there's no regulation. So there's 2 years, so people can just make money, not legal money, because maybe the product is for California, but come on, you can just cross the border, put a bunch of CBD in your backpack and go back. You don't have to
That's
pay.
wild.
You don't have to pay. You don't have to do all that bureaucracy that is, honestly, it's absurd and it's expensive. And we are the country from the border, and we already do that with laptops and iPhones and some kind of things that's just not going to work.
Right. And a lot of folks, I remember, when President Lopez Obrador, some people know him as AMLO, when he came into power about 2 or so years ago with the Morena Party, there was a lot of talk about how cannabis was going to act on the Supreme Court decisions, and we were going to see that legislation, so there would be that clarity. And so far, it doesn't seem like that's been the case. Can you kind of give us an update on what's currently going on, and what do you think about the current administration's performance so far? Have they disappointed, or what are your thoughts on so far?
Yeah, so to have this meeting with you guys, I've been reading a lot because as I telling you, it's really hard to keep on day what is happening, because it's crazy, right? The most accurate reason that I found after all my research from why it's not legal, adult use or personal use or recreational use, whatever you want to call it, in Mexico yet, it is because he doesn't like marijuana.
Really?
We all have a lot of hope. We actually go there and do a lot of debates with the deputies in the Senate. They are people who actually have interest in legalization. You have a lot of opinions with the parliamentaries telling how good will be cannabis legalization, because we can have taxes of that. We can invest in Mexican field work. We can invest in education, but it's so crazy that let's back for the 2018. So, and then we have in these 2 parallels moment, we have cannabis law that we cannot use because it's useless, right? We don't even have until that moment, we don't even have the regulations. So we are just growing the black market of CBD, and people is getting crazy, and we sell CBD as pyramidals and whatever. And this other side, recreational, adult, personal use, is going further in the Supreme Court, right? Until the point that our representatives are pretty much have to do a law. because the
Right.
Supreme Court already recognized that it is a human right, it's a right of any Mexican to
Yeah.
do the same that these guys that already have that permissions, right? So they have to do a law. And ever since 2017, we've been discussing and we have several different kinds of law proposals, some better than others. Some are including a number of plans. Some others are including indigenous people. Some others are just thinking in vertical integration. Some others thinking in cannabis clubs, or, there's some
A lot of different
kind of
options,
lot of
proposals.
yeah. So they finally make an agreement, and the cannabis recreational from actually the name of the Mexican law was adult use. Go to the deputies, to the senators, and go back to make the corrections, and then go back to the Senate, and that in the last point, the last chance, the last step, or making a law is the Senate pass to the president, and the president can say, okay, and we have a law. And the president say, no, I don't want, and we don't have a law. But in the last chance, the senators have to public the final propose, or adult use. They, guess what? They don't.
Sounds like America.
Yeah, they don't. So it was like pretty much the first time in history in Mexico that something like that happened. So it was like they have the last chance to do it, and they don't ask for more time that we've been doing for 5 years or 3 at least, but they don't say anything at all.
Wow,
nothing happened.
That's so frustrating.
And it's crazy. How can that happen and other presidents? So that's it happening. So how is the legal way to go through that because they're supposed to making the law, so they are not making it, but they are not saying anything. So we citizens, we're supposed to do what? Well, social pressure. So we start to do social pressure until not the senators, not the president, not anybody besides the Supreme Court go, to the streets, take the microphone and talk with Mexican people. So we are the Supreme Court here. We cannot make laws because it's not our work. But what we can do is recognize that we've been recognizing in the last 5 years the right of the free personality. So we declare the anti-constitutional and we declare the prohibition of cannabis is anti-constitutional.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The unconstitutional. Yeah. What we've said.
Yeah. So what happened? So that was when. So the Supreme Court, they cannot make laws, but they say, okay, so if cannabis is not anymore, can be anymore. The prohibition cannot be any more constitutional. So you, people in charge of laws, you have to go back there and do a law to put a frame on this. And you people, COFEPRIS, which is that institution it's in charge of the risk of the substance and whatever. And you, COFEPRIS, you have to do something about it. So they develop, a bureaucracy way to, if you are a Mexican with 18 or more, which is our legal, age to vote, for example, you can go to COFEPRIS and then you can ask COFEPRIS for permission to grow or to consume your own cannabis because it's your free personality. It's your right to do it. So you go there in an office. First you try to get an appointment, and
Good
when
luck.
you get an appointment, you can go without your personal letter asking coffee priest the permission of grow or use cannabis, and they gonna deny it because cannabis it's illegal in Mexico. So
Wow.
when they say no, you have that no, because the no it's actually the answer you are looking for. With that no, you go with your lawyer. They say you can do it by yourself, but it's not true. You have to pay a lawyer to go to prosecute the state, and then you start your judge your trail until the Mexican state, and you say, Mexican state, you deny me the permission to consume and grow cannabis, which is my legal right, because I using my free personality. So I demand you, and you pay a lawyer. You can find lawyers who do the all the bureaucracy for free. Or you can either find the one you can pretty much pay. There's not there's not parameters in that. And then after between 6 months or 2 years, in my case, you win. You win the right, and that's the way,
So
the
wait.
legal way. Yeah, that's the legal way we have it, and it is called in other countries habeas corpus, which is the Latin name, and Mexico we call it amparo. And amparo, it's not a law; it's the legal, the legal strategy we have that protect us for something that the state doesn't giving us as a guarantee as our constitutional right of free personality. So the amparo, it's not a law. We have this permission, but who have the permission? People can go to the institution, ask for the permission, get denied that permission, and then go to a trial. It takes between 6 months or 2 years in my case, and have money to pay a lawyer to do that, or find a lawyer to do the process for free. But I mean, it's not a law. It's not universal. It's not for everybody. It's again a privilege. You have to know, for example, how to read to make an appointment in that institution. And we are talking, we are not an alphabetized country. We have to have capital, not just economical capital. You have to have social capital to understand all the process and go to 6 months to 2 years.
It's a lot of hurdles.
Yeah.
And it's for something that you're guaranteed access to according to the courts and through the indigenous histories.
Yeah, and they can say no again, and then you have to
That's insane.
That happened in my case, and in my first trial.
Why did they say no? Why did they say no?
Because it's just a random bureaucracy system, and they don't say no as a fact. They say we have to review your case, 6 months more, 6 months later. Okay, then we can say to you, yes, since 6 months ago, but we just decide to make you desperate and just make all the people behind you waiting in the line to get the same permission, wait more time. But yes, okay, you can. And finally, you get your permission. But this is permission. I want to be super clear. It's not illegal. I mean, it's legal but it's legal just because we have no law. But it's not a universal law.
Right. Yeah, it's really It's a really wide open process then, it sounds like. And,
Yeah.
like I said, it's imbalanced. So, I was reading recently, sorry, that's my dog walking in over there. One of the things I was reading about, one of the last questions I have for you is, one of the ones we were talking about right before we started recording was the presence of the cartels. Mexico, obviously the history of the cartels is, something that is brought up in American media a lot. But more so in this one I was reading is, like you said, with the absence of the definitive laws being created, I saw that farmers as well as cartel groups are, basically preparing for legalization or just kind of taking the ball into their own court and deciding how to deal with it, like you said, as the people have. So can you kind of touch on, like, what is the presence right now of the cartels in cannabis and how much of a concern is that? Or is that a concern?
Oh my God, cartels violence and all cartel-related subject. It's been crazy. I can say this like last 5, maybe 8, but pretty much the last 4 or 5 years. It's been so crazy. Absolutely every kind of violence level, it's just going crazy up. Feminicides, missing people, violence again journalists, the right of expression, it's been going super down. I mean, everything related with that, it's been just going crazy levels of violence. That just Mexico as a country in the legal statistics recognize more than the deaths related to war on drugs, more than all the deaths the dictatorship in South America recognize, all of South America. So
Wow.
We are talking pretty much of more than 100 how this is 100 with 3 more zeros.
100,000.
100,000. Yeah, 100,000
Jesus.
deaths legally recognized by the Mexican state. So we are not talking about not real, no, the statistics from the state. When we go
Right.
deeper,
It's a lot higher.
It's a lot higher. But we are talking about that. We are a country full of blood, full of missing people. People, it's afraid of one of the arguments that the people more discuss about it is we cannot legalize cannabis because narcos is going to get mad with us. And I just want to make a point here that just Mexico, it's a narco state. There's nothing happening with the complicity without the complicity of the government in any kind of levels. In the little town, with 100 people living there, they have enough corruption to let that thing happen, and every kind of power involved until the president. There's nothing in this narco state that
runs through the whole organization. I was saying, sorry.
It's not. First of all, the narco state exists just because it's convenient to the state, and just because the Mexican state it's being part of that. First of all, second, narco in Mexico is way long time ago. Is not just related with cannabis at all. I mean, it's not just related with illegal drugs. Narco in Mexico controls the wood, the lemon, the avocado, right? We have the last years, the example of my state, which is Michoacan. We have a lot of violence, narco violence related, and because the control of the avocado production or the lemon production. So we are talking not drugs. So I just want to put that on the table. Narco in Mexico, narco state in Mexico, it's not just about controlling illegal substances. It's not about just amapola, cannabis, and cocaine with traffic. It's a whole economy. Narco, it's about taking the control to everything that has value, taking for them and put their own value in the market, and they have the power to leave an avocado state producer without avocados, with the avocados, just doing compost. Meanwhile,
Right.
they decide until they put the price they want. The avocados was making compost over there in Michoacan. So they have the power to control everything that has value in the market. It's not just about illegal drugs. So
Right.
let's talk about that reality when we talk about cannabis. So we are talking that narco is narco state, Mexican narco state is controlling the woods in the indigenous communities. It's controlling the avocado, Michoacan. It's controlling the lemon. It's controlling all the methamphetamine, all the kind of these derivatives productions in the fields, the laboratories. Yes, they are doing also that. They are also doing the transportation. They are also doing they are doing all of that, but they are also doing something super important, which is they are replacing the role of the Mexican state when the Mexican state totally abandoned that place. They are giving medicines to the kids in the poor village. They are doing the huge parties for the churches. They are building the schools. So there are part since the beginning from the Mexican culture and economy. So it's a subject that is really complicated, but if we put something on the table, narco state, it controls pretty much everything. I don't think they're going to have a lot of problems legalizing, because avocado is legal.
Right.
Lemon, it's legal.
So we're basically looking at, we're probably going to see some cartel operators if and whenever Mexico legalizes. That sounds like, is that correct?
I think, the legal market, it's never going to replace the black market. And you guys know that pretty well. And the other states with regulation on the other countries, as maybe Colombia and Uruguay, we all know that legalization, it's not the end of the legal market. But we also know that it's the first step for a lot of social changes that that we need. We don't need. We cannot fight against the narco state in Mexico, but when we can develop a legal part who pay taxes and work safely. Working with them, because we already work with them, because our economy is totally part. We are, Mexico, it's a narco state, so we can develop process as people, for example, which are more vulnerable in this all production, that we never think about it. So all of us in this world that smoke for first time a joint, that joint was produced in the global south for an indigenous or a field worker, probably in Mexico or in Colombia or in whatever, Marruecos. To build that abundance and that all royalties and that just abundance that we are all waiting for the green industry, we have to think first in legacy. We have to think about that. If it's Mexico the third or the fifth marijuana producer in the world, who is really? Who are the growers? So there you have the growers as me, that we are privileged people living in a city, doing indoor in our back door. But what about the millions and millions of community and field workers involved in the cannabis production, that they don't have neither the right to choose if they want or not? They have to do it because they cannot sell the corn, which is our ancestral good. There's not more value anymore in the market. They cannot live their lives with that. They are already poor. So
they need support.
What happened? yeah, what happened with that communities, which is pretty much the growers in our country. There are thousands of communities involved in that. We have to think in what we're gonna do with all peoples who are using their bodies to transport. We have to think in all the women and trans people in the streets selling that substance, because they don't, our society, they don't make another place to them to live with dignity, right? And then we have to think in us as cannabis users, also as cannabis patients. So if we realize all the production chains since the beginning, and we are discussing cannabis law in Mexico, we have to talk first in real conditions. I mean, we've been discussing ever from 2015 about the cannabis law, pretending that we are not a cannabis producer country. We're pretending that we are not a narco state, you know, so that make everything super more complicated.
Got to face the reality before you can do anything, that's for sure. Well, Polita, I really appreciate you diving in on this. There's so much more that we could talk, and I would love to have you back on, and we can talk about, more about Mexico, but also just your work in the Americas in general. And, with Cannativa, we've just scratched the surface. So I would love to have you back on anytime. But we do need to wrap up here. And one thing I love to do before I wrap up the show is turn it over to you. Is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you want the listeners to know about, or just in general, what do you want people to come away from watching this? What do you want them to understand about Mexico and its cannabis situation?
Well, for people out there in the world, I just want to say that Mexico, it's crazy and beautiful country, and it is actually part of our culture to grow cannabis. And there we need to build not just us here inside. We need to build others narratives. We need to build other chances to communicate between countries. We need to develop more stronger strategies to guarantee social justice in cannabis industry. Social justice is not just it's just not something that we have to hope a law can give us. Social justice is something we build in our houses, in the streets, as a society, as a cannabis community. So let's give the chance to the people of cannabis, be part to the cannabis industry. So let's think about social justice.
Absolutely. Yeah. You can't think cannabis legalization without social justice unless you're just thinking about it from a capitalistic, greedy perspective. And hey, you know what? Let's just try to minimize those folks altogether from the space.
Yeah, we have a lot of that already.
Yeah, too much of that. All right. Well, Polita, I really appreciate you walking us through it. Like I said, I'd love to get you on here again anytime soon. I appreciate you shedding so much light and catching us up on what's been going on in Mexico. We're going to be putting all your social media and where to follow on the scroll, so don't worry about telling us now. But if you are listening on from podcast form, I guess you should. So, Polita, actually, can you just tell us how to follow you and how to stay up with Cannativa?
Yeah, totally. So we are in all kind of media as everybody else. So me, I'm as you can find me just as Polita Pepper and Cannativa with double N. And yeah, here we are.
Cool.
Give us a follow.
We'll have a little scroll bar down here that you can check out when we do this and we edit it properly. Polita, thank you so much for your time. All the best to you, and hope to see you soon.
Here with you, amigo. I'm super happy, and I'm super glad for this kind of spaces you are opening, because this space is not just about your podcast. It's about giving voice to some different realities of cannabis world that people don't even want to see. Maybe some people doesn't even realize that the complexities of the other countries in the world. So I really appreciate, and I'm super glad that you are open this space for all of us.
My pleasure. I'm glad it's so well received. And hey, if anybody on the international scene is watching, we've got Ireland, we've got Mexico, we got a whole lot more countries to talk about. So hit me up anytime and we'll do more of these soon.